Oops, sorry. Thanks, Jeff. So let me start again. My name is CK. I'm a tech support engineer for Yamaha. Thanks for joining us today, and I hope you've caught the video yesterday, which is the Rivage PM series basic operations and setup. Today we'll be covering some of the advanced features that we think will be useful for you guys. Some of these features have been around since before the PM3 and 5 release, but some are new with the version 4 and after. So let's get to the slides. Okay, so advanced features. What we have for today is some advanced scene operations. We'll go through the sense functions and some shift key and shortcuts for you guys that are we find it quite useful in during your setup, and also to access some of the scenes and the sense function. Okay, the first advanced scene function is overlay. So for those of you who don't know what overlay is, it's a temporary offset in certain values. It can be a fader value or a mixed send value. So these values can be offset on top of your current mix data or any whatever mix settings you have them at. So this is great for temporary offsets, so you don't need to make any permanent change while you're doing the show, especially if it's a tour or theatrical performance where things are quite fixed and scripted. You don't want to be doing too much changes to the actual scene data when temporary changes come about. So like I said, you can make changes in fader level and your mix sense. You can see it over here. You can see it over here. So you just need to on the overlay and make your changes. And I'll show you some in the shortcut session. I'll show you a shortcut how to do that. So what can this be used for? Let's say you have a substitute musician, you have your house performance, and you have someone that substitutes in. You might want to increase or decrease the volumes of the sense because this person is not the regular, or maybe this performer is regular but that day is not feeling so well, or is pushing a bit too much. You know that you want to keep the same settings, but you want to just bring up a bit, maybe by 3 dB, and you know that when things go back to normal, these settings will just be off. So what you can do is on the overlay, set the overlay to +3 dB for that channel, and once everything goes back to normal, you can just turn the overlay off. So that way you don't need to create a new scene, you don't need to tweak any settings and worry whether you have saved them accidentally over the original settings. So overlay is a great way to just put in that overlay filter without disturbing any of your original settings. So anyway, if anyone has questions, please leave your questions in the comments so we can answer them. My colleagues or myself will answer them. Don't worry about interrupting me, just shoot any questions that you have. So like I said, overlay is for temporary changes. We don't really use it for permanent changes because this overlay can be turned on and off and tweaked without saving. Of course, if you have regular overlays that you want to put over your scenes, you have the library, the overlay library over here. So the next, scene functions. So all these functions can be found when you click the scene button. So you have your scene list, which is the regular scenes, and then overlay, which is what I explained earlier, and event list. So this is event list. So we use event list to trigger some functions. It can be scenes, user setups, effects, and channels. So like I said yesterday, scenes and user setups are separate in our Rivage consoles. So if you recall a scene, the user setup will not change with it. You have to recall the user setup separately. So what we were planning to do for last year's Ignite Music Fest, we were using a PM10 on front of house and PM7 on Mons. Of course, with a festival layout, we have multiple engineers. Of course, we have the system tech and everything. So the engineers all have their own scenes that correspond to whatever band they're mixing for. Some engineers mix for multiple bands, and of course, with every engineer that comes in, they have their own preferences. They have their own custom fader banks, and certain engineers will use these channels, and they don't share channels. Some of them don't share channels. So what this is quite useful for is that you can see I just set up a rough one here. I just set it to manual recall, which means you have to manually recall, but you can program this into your user-defined keys. Manual recall of scene 1, which is the opening band. For example, I'm the one mixing the opening band. If I manually recall these event lists, the event list will also recall my user preset. So instead of recalling the scene and then going to the user preset and recalling the user preset, we can just click on the event list and recall, and then this user preset or whatever function, it can be a channel function or effects function or channel library, something like that, will recall with it. So in this case, we use a user setup. So we can tie scenes to this example will be a user. So we tie scenes to engineers personalized setup on the console. So the next band is the main band, and maybe my colleague Aloysius is mixing it. We can tie this to his user preferences, so it can be screen settings, user-defined keys, and custom faders, stuff like that. Of course, if you are not using manual recall, we have timecode, we have internal timecode and external timecode in, and MIDI timecode. So you can have external sources triggering these recalls if you have something that is more scripted and more planned out. Yeah. So that is where you select your sources and frame rate. Okay, so now on to updated sense. So this has been covered in the launch video, but I'm not sure if everyone has seen this before. So the Rivage PM5 and 3 have the new surfaces have this dedicated send knob, send section, which also doubles up as your user-defined knob. So this is slightly different from the Rivage PM10. So what it can be used for, of course, your user-defined knobs can be used to send signal. So you can route your inputs to your mixers, matrices, and all that. And of course, you can also use it to set your pan. Okay, this is quite useful because you can look at the left side of this pop-up window. You can roughly see where this channel or where this source is being sent to. So if it's being sent to an output, you can have a rough overview, because the Rivage series has quite a lot of output channels. This is a great way to just get an overview of what is being sent where. And then to increase, decrease, to send or to pan, you can use this encoder, or you can just use your finger to drag along this bar. So it's quite useful. Very handy, and it doesn't take you out of your, you can see the selected channel page is still at the back, and this small window is just overlaid on top. Once you close it, it goes back to whatever was behind. So this doesn't change the page you're on, and you have to navigate back. So it's quite useful, this updated sense function. And one more sense function that is useful that I don't really know if many people are using, or if they know about it at all. This is the sense follow. So this applies to your direct outs or your variable output buses. The sense follow is independent to your direct outs or send points. So you can see here in pink, we have our various send points. This is quite typical of any console. We have all the way from pre-filter to our post-on send point. So this can be a direct out or a variable output bus. So you can send to your mix or your matrix. So of course, post-on, you will not have your, or rather you will have your signal being sent to somewhere affected if you on or off, mute or unmute. It will be affected by your fader. It will be affected by dynamics, inserts if it's before, and then of course your EQ. And pre-filter, of course, will not be affected by anything but your gain, your head amp settings. So you have your send point. That is quite self-explanatory, but the sense follow is an additional function for you to be able to independently set your send point and also have the send point follow settings that are made after. So what is good about this is that you can have a pre-filter send point or pre-EQ send point. Let's say you have it set, you have your pre-fader send point on your monitor wedges on stage. So of course, pre-fader, your fader and your on button will not affect these the levels of that input being sent to the wedges. What happens quite commonly in some cases is someone decides to unplug something, a guitar, bass, keyboards, and there's a pop. But if you, even though, and this will happen even though your channels are muted, right? Because your send point is pre-fade, and even if you bring your fader down. So what sense follow allows you to do, if let's say you sense follow your on button, for example, after the band is done with their performance, turning over to the next band, if you hit a mute group or you mute that channel, you don't need to worry about having someone accidentally unplug an instrument or a mic causing that pop, or someone changing a mic causing that pop, not on the FOH because you've muted, but on the wedges. So that is what you can use your sense follow for. Of course, you can have it follow your fader, or you can have it follow DCA settings. So on DCA, you'll follow your DCA fader and your DCA on off. So how can you find it? You can see that this is your entire channel signal flow, all the way from your gain and your silk to your DCAs. If you go to your inserts, direct out, you go to your 12 channel direct out, you'll see that there is this follow. So you can choose 3 options: on, fader, or DCA. So you can see that here, just at the top, you have your direct out point, and then on the next picture, this is your sense 2, so your channel sending 2. Okay, let me go back to the direct out. So on direct out, you can see here, it's a bit more clear because you can see that it's a pre-filter direct out point, but it's following the DCA for the sense follow. So whatever you do on your DCA, if you mute the entire DCA, let's say it's a group drum, your entire drum and your percussions, this whole thing will be treated as though as it's a mute group. When you mute everything, all the inputs mute. Even though your direct out point is pre-filter, your sense follow will be, or rather your DCA, your direct out follow will be on your DCA settings. So the direct out will be also muted. The input going out directly will be muted as well. So that's quite useful if you don't want to have such a late send point, but you also want something like the on off or fader to be to affect the sending of the signal. Okay, and our next advanced feature is port to port. So port to port is the port to port function allows us to freely route signal from an input port to an output port. So this is not an input channel, it's an input port. So the actual analog inputs from, let's say, an RPIO to an actual analog output port of another RPIO. So you don't need to use a mixing channel. So if you don't want to have too many channels to manage, or if you already have a high channel count show, you don't want to be adding channels that if you're using it for port to port, just sending signal, not really doing processing, you might not want to use a mixing channel. So this applies to your RY cards, MY, and HY cards. So the RY cards are the actual input output cards on the RPIO, and then MY, HY are the additional, the twin lane, MADI, AES, and all that. And of course, the AES and Omnis on your control surfaces. So this function, it can be any analog input like a mic. It can be inputs coming like a mix down coming from another console, going analog in into the RPIO. You can route it internally to any output. It doesn't need to be, this is just an example picture, it can be on another RPIO or another card slot. It can even be Dante or AES, it doesn't matter. So if you go to patch and port to port, you'll see this. So before you do this, if you remember the video yesterday, you can refer back to it. You will see that in my system configuration, near the bottom center, bottom right, you have this function that where you assign channels, and then if you are using the port to port to route signal between card slots, you can see HY1, 2, 3, 4 and local. If you are routing between them, do remember to enable your slot bridge. So you'll see a slot bridge with an encoder like this. You can increase the number of channels that you want, and then don't forget to enable those channels first before you start patching, because if not, you'll patch and you realize that there's nothing coming in or going out. After that, you can go to this page. So what you have here is you can select what slot. So the HYs are the HY cards, so it'd be your twin lane cards, Dante cards, Mardi cards. The slot bridge is the bridge you use to patch from different cards. So you patch HY1 to 2, you will need to use the slot bridge. But if you're patching HY1 to HY1, so all your main, your M1s to M8, you can patch internally without using the slot bridge because it's the same card. So I hope that makes some sense to you guys. So the important thing is, if you're patching within the card, you don't need to use the slot bridge. If you're patching outside of the card, you need to utilize the slot bridge. Okay, so on the left is your patch from. So if I'm patching out, I will patch from, let's say, RY1 to the bridge in here. And then from the bridge in, I go to, let's say, HY2. I will have to patch from the bridge out to an output card slot, which in this case is my RY5 and 6. So I have this little diagram here. Hopefully this makes it a bit clearer. So we have our HY1 and HY2. We're trying to patch in between from HY1 to HY2. So of course, if I'm patching internally from any one of my 8 RPIOs from M1 to M8, I can just patch without using the slot bridge this way, no issue. But if I'm patching out to another card, either my sub network, S1 to S8, it can be a Dante card also, because we have Dante HY cards. We have to use our slot bridge. So we patch our input ports to the slot bridge inputs, and then it goes to the HY2 slot bridge outputs, which you can then patch to any existing output ports you have in your sub network, or any card for that matter. Okay, so example of how we use this is for those that have been to our YDEC, for those that have attended some demos where we use multi-track recording or multi-track playback on our Rivage system, our Rivage PM10 that we have. How we normally send multi-tracks is through DVS. So we send multi-tracks through DVS via Dante to our Rivage PM10. So we have a Dante card installed, and multi-tracks are coming in, so it can be like 20-30 tracks. And then we want these tracks to, if it's just a digital input and we want you to demo the console, you can't really play with certain things. Of course, you cannot adjust your analog gain, and because it's a Rivage PM10, we definitely want you to have that silk texture there for you to mess around with, for you to hear how it sounds like and how it feels. So what we do is we use our port-to-port function. We route Dante coming in. So right now it's not HY1. We usually use HY4, but that doesn't matter. So we use the Dante card. The input is a digital input, so it's not even an actual analog in. So you can route digital inputs to the slot bridge and out through our HY1, which comes out through our RPIOs. So we route it, basically we route Dante to an analog output, and analog output we come back in physically with physical XLRs to the RPIO. So you guys can play around, you can mix on with analog gain control, your head amp control, and also our Rupert Neve Silk preamps. So that's how that's one way that we use it quite frequently for those that have come to our wire deck and have used or demoed our PM10 before. Okay, on to our special keys, encoders, and shift key shortcuts. So the shift key has a few, quite a few functions and shortcuts, and these are some of the shortcuts that we use often and find it quite useful. So you'll find that the shift key can do a lot of like global or multiple parameter change, temporary channel links, stuff like that. And so you can link a bunch of channels or set a bunch of parameters and basically copy them over a certain amount of channels. You can do it all 288 channels, up to you. So just to let you know, this gray finger here means hold, and the white one means just press. So for a temporary channel link, what we do is we hold the shift key and we press the select button of whatever channel that we want to link, and then from then on these channels will be linked. So this is just a temporary link. What we use this for is maybe we want to bring up faders to a certain level, or we want to adjust certain parameters. Maybe we want to just put a high pass filter at a certain frequency for a bunch of channels, maybe like 10 channels, and we don't want to do it one by one or do it on one and start to copy paste. So we can just do a temporary channel link, set the high pass filter, unlink them, and then that's it. So it's quite fast to do that. We also can set multiple parameter set. So we hold our shift key and then we can choose things like our EQ type. So we got 4 EQ types and a bunch of dynamic types. So let's say we want aggressive EQ on all our 16 drum channels. We hold shift, we go to the select button of the EQ type, we press aggressive, and then it will prompt you to ask which channels do you want this applied to, and then we just select all our maybe our 20 drum channels, and then it will be set through 20 channels. You don't need to do it one by one. And I know a lot of guys use QA, QB. This console can be used with multiple users, or if you have one IEM and one wedge, you might want to use dual Q buses. So how to get from QA to QB or to both QA and B? You hold shift and press the Q button on whichever channel that you want to Q, and it will just toggle. You will see it on the screen where the meters are. So you can just toggle either one of the 3 options. Okay, now we move to overlay. So overlay was our first advanced function. So we can toggle and edit the overlay functions. So holding shift and pressing overlay will toggle the overlay on and off, and then holding overlay, the overlay function, the button which is around your scenes, so the scene section, if you hold it, you can use your faders to edit the overlay. So the screen I showed you earlier was just using the touch and turn knob, and you have to go to the actual overlay page. But if you want to do something quickly, you can just hold overlay and then you use your fader, kind of like sense on fader. You use your fader to up or lower certain function, certain like fader levels. Then once you're done, you just hold overlay again, and this all will be activated. And lastly, our sense follow. Hold shift and press on one of the options, whatever option you want, on fader or DCA, and you can multiple set your sense follow. So something new with the PM3 and PM5 is the function encoder. You can, if you notice, of course, the PM10 versus the PM3 and 5, or PM10 and 7 versus the 3 and 5, the selected channel section has been replaced by that screen. You can see in the background here, this used to be the very large selected channel. It's quite useful because you can adjust pretty much anything that you want on the selected channel. But now, since it's been replaced by a screen, the selected channel is much more compact and optimized. I think this function encoder serves a multi-purpose. So it's a user-defined encoder, which you can change its function on the fly. This is where it lives. It's right at the bottom here of the selected channel. So this should be familiar with any CLQL user. So it's your selected channel. Right at the bottom, you have this function encoder. So you can use it to, you can assign it to any on-screen encoder. Like this one at the back here, you'll see that for those familiar with Yamaha consoles, this is not your normal touch and turn color. It's not the pink color. This is yellow. So if you hold the function button, the function encoder, press and hold, and select any on-screen encoder, can be digital gain, silk, or your fader encoder. Any one of these, just click. When the ring around it has when it has a yellow ring around it, what you can do with the function encoder is you can adjust that parameter. So this is great because of course function knob has been selected channel area has been made more compact. Certain functions are not in the selected channel, and things like silk, digital gain is not in the selected channel, and maybe you have some channels coming in, input channels that you need to tweak digital gain for, and you don't want to change this to digital gain all the way because most of your inputs are analog. So you can use that. You can use this for any on-screen encoder. So that's quite useful for this encoder that they added. So it's multifunction. You don't need to go to the setup and program it to do something. You can just switch it on the fly. So you just hold and click an encoder. You can do whatever adjustments you want, and then you can move on to the next setting. So this you don't need to touch and turn. It will just be saved there until you change. So it's quite a useful function. Okay, so this is the last part. These are some additional functions that I don't have time to go through, but quite kind of like runner-up functions that still useful, but there are videos out there already, and you can find them for yourself, like on YouTube and all that. So theater mode is one of the useful functions. This came out in version 2.5. Right now it's on version 4 already. So what theater mode gives you is additional EQ and dynamic banks. So you can see now you have A, B, C, and D. So we have 4 banks of EQ and dynamics. And these 4 banks, you can link these 4 banks and toggle between them. So this is in theater mode. What this is used for is that if you have an actor, a performer using this channel 1, and perhaps they have costume changes and stuff like that, different sections that require different dynamic settings. Maybe once certain section is speech, another section is more like singing. You can set different dynamics and EQs, or based off that different costume change, mic placements, or different dynamics between the performance. You also have actors library. So what actors library is you can save the settings of that channel into an actors library, and for example they change mic channels, maybe they swap different roles, or later on they just change to a different role because that mic is tagged to the costume or something like that. You can just recall this actors library to another channel, and then anytime actors swap around, you can just recall it. It's kind of like an input library, but it's useful because it's tagged to that performer's name, and then you can recall it based off which channel they're using, which mic they are using, quite quickly. So this is the next function, sub in. It's kind of like port to port function. So what this does is that it routes your input ports to your mix or your matrices. So port to port is routing input ports to output ports. This one routes the input ports straight to your mix. So again, you don't have to use any mixing channels. If typically without this function, you will have to route. You have to have an actual input, use an actual input channel, and then send it to a mix or matrix. So what this does is just it routes directly. It will be useful for probably more like broadcast or recording when other consoles are sending you mix downs or like stereo or mono mixes. You can just take that in and then route it to a mix, and then you can send it out to wherever you need to send it out to without using, because it's just a mix down. You just take it in. Processing can be done on your mix channel. You're not really doing much channel processing, and you can send it out. So this is quite useful. You can save input channels and also manage your, if you're broadcasting output, it manages it better. And our last function is isolate. So isolate is like a fast and powerful recall save. What it's used for is usually we have our recall save settings. Sometimes we don't have all the functions, all the recall save parameters. We take out some parameters. We only recall save certain things like faders or EQ, stuff like that. And then when we switch scenes, in any case we are not sure what the next scene is holding, what data it's holding, we can just press isolate. So isolate will not overwrite your recall save settings, so your recall save settings stay the same. And then once you go to the next scene, you can check and then you turn off isolate. So it's quite useful because you can just turn it on and off while keeping your recall save settings intact. So you don't need to change any settings, or you don't need to worry about doing all these movement and changes during the show itself. So a lot of time constraint, just isolate, go to the next scene, and then you can figure it out from there. So that is something that if you guys think that this is useful for you, you can go and read up a bit more, or you can ask in the Q&A. If you have any questions regarding the previous sections, any of the functions, if you think that I want to use this but I'm not sure how to go about using it, or if you have any questions from yesterday's video, I can answer them soon. I think this is the last slide, and yes, now it's the Q&A session. So if there's anything on the Rivage PM series that you want to ask, please ask in the comment section. We'll wait for some questions. It can be related to yesterday's or today's topic, and also if you need to see how I navigate to certain places, I can use the Rivage editor and show you how it's done and stuff like that. I just don't have the actual console with me now, but I can use the editor if it's possible. So please, any questions, please ask. We'll do our best to answer. Alright, for those that are watching this video not live, in a later point in time, if you have any questions, and of course we can't answer you live because it's not live anymore, don't hesitate to contact us via email, through this Facebook page. We can always answer your questions via WhatsApp, call, or email. No issue. Okay, so I have a question here. Let me read it out. Is there a way to select multiple input channels at once and change one parameter across all channels? For example, select all drum inputs and then change the EQ type from smooth to aggressive. Yes. So by default, let's say it's all on precise. You want to change all drum inputs from smooth or from smooth to aggressive or whatever. You can use either the temporary channel select, or you can use the let me go back to you can use the temporary channel link here. So you can hold shift down and select all, let's say you have 16 drum channels, you can select all 16 drum channels and do your changes from there, or you can set multiple parameters. So it can be something like it might not even be your drums, it can be all over the place, it doesn't matter. You can set just hold shift, press on the EQ select, so this will be same as your CL or QL, select aggressive, and then a pop-up window will tell you what channels do you want to apply this on, and then you can just select the range that you want to change. For temporary channel link, if you have a generic EQ, so let's say you are miking up a group of the same instruments, let's say like violins, and then you don't really have much info, you just want to start with a very generic EQ, or you have a bunch of like 8 vocal mics that you don't really know who is coming, you know, that kind of show. You can do a temporary channel link, quickly set up your rough vocal EQ, and then from there you can tweak. So let's say you link those 8 channels, you do your EQ, it will be applied across all 8 channels, and then you can do like rough compression, and then once the vocalists or the announcers come in, you can slowly tweak your threshold, you can tweak your EQ a bit more from there. So that will be temporary channel link. But if you're just looking to change the parameters, your EQ parameters, you can just use the multiple parameter set by holding down shift and selecting what EQ type you want to change to. Right, thanks for the question, man. Sorry, CL doesn't have the shift button. I think you need to upgrade to at least a PM5. Okay, Jeff, you have a question? Is Silk emulation tagged with mic pre? Yes. So it's not tagged to, like, let's say use a Ryo stage box. You use it with the Rivage, which is possible. They work together. But what you lose out is the mic pre's and the Silk emulation. So that Silk is it resides in the RPIOs itself. So it's tagged to a mic pre. Any digital input coming in also will not have that. So if I play something through, let's say a PCIe card, through Dante, no, it will not, even though it's coming in digitally on a PM10. Okay, so you want to record multi-track without the Silk. Okay, I get what you mean. You want to do your recording with and without the silk. Okay, so the silk parameter you can turn on and off. So are you talking about just the silk or the mic pre's? Because the silk can be turned on and off. So by default, if it's off, it's just the mic pre only, not the the signal will be affected by your head amp settings and your mic pre, and not your silk. Okay, Ken, you can call me. Okay, we can take it offline. Does anyone else have any other questions? I can pass you my number or email later. So yes, yeah, we'll need to double check if that is before silk or after. So if there's no more questions, thank you everyone for coming and spending time watching, although it's a weekday afternoon. We leave this video up for a while, so if you have friends that are interested in watching but not able to make it because of like work commitments, no worries, you can just come to our Facebook and watch the video, or if you forget something, you can watch the video again. Yesterday's video should still be up, so you can refer to that as well for if you miss our Rivage Basics webinar. So thanks again for coming, and if you like what we're doing, we have our webinars quite regularly during this period, and you can follow our Instagram, our Facebook pages, and keep yourself updated with everything we're doing here. We hope you enjoy our webinars, and thanks for joining us again. All right, see you in the next webinar.